Well, hello, and welcome to another episode of Unstoppable Mindset. Today we get to chat with Derek Healy. Derek has an interesting story to tell, a wicked sense of humor. But if we were to really talk about Derek, he's a business development expert, investor, speaker, and coach. My gosh. But I don't know what he does in his spare time. We're really glad to have him, though, to be with us today. He's got, I know, a lot of interesting and relevant things to talk about. So we're going to get to all of it. So let me just say, Derek, welcome to Unstoppable Mindset. How are you?
I am wonderful, Michael, and thank you very much. What a warm introduction, and I really appreciate your time. Looking forward to having a conversation.
Me too. Well, tell me a little bit about maybe the early Derek. Let's start out and get the early part out of the way so we can find out all your early secrets.
Absolutely. Well, I'll try and keep this as clean as possible. I know that I want to keep this kid friendly, so I will. Irish originally. I'm sure you can hear that in the accent. I've been over here in Australia for 13, 14 years, and as the looks are fading, it seems the accent is getting slightly stronger again. But started off in Ireland. Relatively simple Irish upbringing, surrounded by sport, surrounded by humor, surrounded by bad weather, and then obviously a pint or two in between. And it brought me over to this wonderful land. Traveled all over the world, of course. Like most Irish, we invade many countries, but we do it with a sleeping bag and a lunchbox.
Did the bad weather get better when you had a pint?
Say again.
Did the bad weather get better when you had a pint?
Well, I honestly think that's nearly Irish. The Irish are known for the weather and they're known for their drink. And I think if one disappeared, Ireland would disappear. They come hand in hand. It's a package deal. So yeah, it's a package deal. But one of my first football teams is down the country football teams. And our dressing room was in the back of a pub. It was the old storehouse of a pub. So that's how integrated alcohol and it is into the Irish community, if you like.
Understand. I've been to Ireland. I've only been once, but I was there for about 12 days, as I recall. We were promoting my book, Thunderdog. And yes. So I was invited over by the Irish Guide Dog School. And so we did a number of speeches that they had planned for us. Thoroughly enjoyed the time, loved the music, of course, needless to say. And as we talked about earlier, on the way over on our flight, I was tuning around the various airplane music channels and I heard this Irish music and I was listening to it and heard it was a group called the Merry Plowboys. And I learned about them. They performed at the Castle Rock Inn. We were in Dublin a bit and I was hoping to go hear them, but unfortunately the one night we had available, they weren't performing that night, so I didn't get to go hear them. So I have to contend myself with my CDs.
There you go. Well, I'm sure the door is not closed. The door is not closed. It will be open and they will present themselves soon enough, I presume.
One way or another, we will definitely work it out. So, so you were in Ireland for a long time. When did you leave Ireland?
I left Ireland. It must have been around, it was around the global financial crisis. The global financial crisis, and that hit everyone, as you know. And it's interesting, when I look back at it, there's similarities to now, if you like, from an economic standpoint.
Yeah.
And especially in Australia right now, there's a lot of, there's a lot of talk in the corridors about how bad things are. And if I think back in Ireland, I don't even think the global financial crisis was as bad for everyone. I think it was more, everyone was saying it, so people would just get on board and say, yeah, things really are bad.
Like, so what year was that?
That was around 2008, 2009. That's what I thought.
Yeah, 2008.
Coming into 2010. So we were in Ireland and the usual stuff. A lot of employers would use that opportunity to get rid of a lot of people, cut costs. But then obviously at the same time, a lot of those people would increase the price of living. So things were relatively hard on the surface for a lot of Irish people. But to be honest with you, that 2 years that all that was happening, myself and my friends have never traveled as much. We traveled all over Europe. Again, none of us were working, but we found a way to do it. So as you can sort of adjust to the way of life, even though things are tough, you actually can do more when you have less than when you have more and you don't appreciate it.
Yeah. Well, there are, of course, lots of hostels and other things around Europe that made it a little bit easier for people who didn't have a lot of money to be able to travel.
Hostels. And we were quite, one thing about the Irish, we're able to talk our way into trouble and out of it at the same time.
There you go.
And so there was times that we were over there traveling Europe and we were going to stay. We had no money, myself and a friend of mine. We were nearly going to have to sleep at a train station in Romania somewhere. And then we found these two ladies and they said, right, you can come back with us. And they let us stay with them for a while. Like it was just an adventure. It was beautiful. But all good things must come to an end. So I needed to get my foot down, start earning some money, build a bit of a life. And here, Australia opened the opportunity for me.
How did that happen? So what brought you to Australia? What made that all happen?
It's interesting. I've never really been, in my younger years, I was never really a planner. Like I never looked at a book and said, I'm interested in going here, 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 here. I suppose if I take a back step, I think one of the worst things that youth can have is almost talent. Because if you're talented, it doesn't push you to the next level. You sort of rest on your laurels a bit. And that was the same with all my travel adventures. I've traveled all over the world and it was never with planning. It was always with, let's see where this takes me. And with Australia, it was much the same. I had a brother out here and he was doing quite well. That was all the invitation I needed. Mm-hmm. And I said, I wasn't going out necessarily to be with him, but I said, Australia, that will do. It was like throwing a dart in a dartboard. And I said, Australia. But I could have very well ended up in Arizona or Nevada or even California. And I could be having this live with you if the stars align differently. But I'm in Australia.
What were you doing before you encountered the world financial crisis in 2008?
Well, funny enough, I was in the financial industry. So I was with my first ever, how would you say, job out of college was with Bank of America, which was an amazing learning experience. What a company to work for, I have to say. I don't know what it's like now, but when I was there in Ireland, it was an amazing adventure. So it was always corporate sales, whether it be property, recruitment, or even the financial side of things.
Right.
Always.
Right.
So a good solid background in corporate selling, if you like.
How long were you there?
In Bank of America.
Mm-hmm.
It was my first, that was my first real job, if you like. And it was, I had just left college, and through a number of bad decisions in college, my mind almost went snap, and that was from drug or alcohol or just over enjoyment. So about 3 or 4 years of just over enjoying oneself, my mind had gone snap. So I was suffering from a little bit of depression. And my mother, I remember my mother had brought me to the interview and I was driving across country. This is only about 20 years old, 19, 20 years old. I was driving across country, 7 a.m., ice cold, winter's morning in Ireland. And I pulled up, I didn't even know what Bank of America was. I pulled up to this complex housing nearly 1,000 people. And it was quite intimidating, but looked before I was about to leave the car, I was there. I looked back at her, looking for some sympathy. Please don't make me come in here. I got the raise of an Irish mother's hand, and I was like, get in there. So I went. I went in, had initial trainings with the guys. It was my first. You're in this environment. You're coming from college, and Bank of America is very corporate. You've got the suit, you've got the tie, you've got all of that. So I learned from that. Even dressing up, it's like getting ready for a football game. Yeah. You get involved, you get ready, and it's like go time. So even that was a beautiful learning experience for me, just even entering that building for the first time.
What year was that?
That would have been maybe 2004, 2005, something like that.
So yeah, I understand exactly what you're saying. It's a whole different environment than we tend to be used to when we're students, and suddenly you're thrown into this whole different thing that unfortunately, college doesn't help prepare you for necessarily.
No, it doesn't. It doesn't. It doesn't. And it's funny. If you look at leaderships, the beauty of mentorship or leadership is you're being mentored or you're being led by people that have done it before. And they can give you real life examples of what to look out for and what to expect. And perhaps the people that in certain universities, they're training you for something that isn't real, if that makes sense.
Mm-hmm.
They're training you from books or from other people's experiences, and they're not able to articulate it or paint the picture correctly. And that opens up a lot of uncertainty when people enter the working world. So yeah, it is quite a big culture shock. I'm yet to find someone actually that can say that college or university prepared them for the real world. I'm yet to meet someone. I'm not sure if you can actually introduce me to someone that can attest to that.
Well, I think something a little different. I think like here, I went to the University of California at Irvine, which is a research institution. It was a new campus at the time when I went there. But one of the things that generally we were told was that the junior college or community colleges and even the Cal State system, which were 4-year colleges, tended to be much more teaching oriented. And I think tended to probably have more people who were a little bit closer to what you would find in a lot of industry and so on. And some of the people came from there, as opposed to most people at the universities. And it isn't a criticism, it's a different world. But most people from the universities are in a much more theoretical world, or maybe in a scientific environment, experimental, but still, you're right. They don't come from an environment where they think about teaching people to be prepared for what comes outside of the university and all those other kinds of things.
And I think, again, I'm not sure of the university systems right now, but there's a lot of talk about like safe places, if you like, or even censoring the way people talk or the way people debate. And I think debate is such a beautiful thing. And in the years that I've worked, 20 years in the corporate space, and I've trained and mentored hundreds of people. But the one thing I've learned with the people that are unsuccessful is the people that are unable to deal with adversity, and they're unable to bounce back from disappointment, or they're unwilling to push themselves into uncomfortable situations and stay there. That's the difference between success and failure, I think. And unfortunately, what seems to be the trend is universities are sheltering people specifically from those areas of growth.
I think there's probably some merit to that. Yeah.
Which is, so it'll be interesting to see. It's all a big experiment. It's all a big game. So we'll see in 10, 15 years what the results are.
And whether anyone makes a real change. Or the other side of it is the universities do what they do, and that's okay for one group of people. But still, I hear what you're saying. And that if college is really supposed to prepare us for life, then there are certainly other things that need to be brought into the curriculum somehow.
That's so true. That's so true. But another thing, actually, on the university side of things, in Ireland, we've got relatively free education system, which is an amazing that we are doing that, because education is so important. But the problem with that is whether it be an industry or not, the problem with that is when you're unsure of what to do, you're nearly pushed towards university. So even when a lot of my friends were going to university, no one knew what they wanted to do, and very few are doing what they went to university for. But it seems like it's like the next logical step to go towards. And that's not always right either. It's more following. I don't think university should be going where you don't know what you want to do. You should need to have a vision. You should need to have, because as we know, if you make a decision, whether it be right or wrong, at least you've made a decision. So when you make a bad decision, you can recorrect and then turn that into a good decision. Now that's even a learning process. But if you're just literally going to university because everyone else is, I don't think that's necessarily your decision, and therefore I don't think the results can be achieved. Personally.
Yeah, I think there are too many people probably who, putting it in quotes, go to find themselves, and that's unfortunate. If they really feel that they have to do that, they haven't been prepared, or maybe haven't gotten what they need from their parents. And I will say there are some who do find themselves, but there are a lot of people who still come out with a lot of challenges, and it's very unfortunate that it isn't just the academic knowledge I would like to see people get from college, university, but rather some of the other life knowledge that people could bring. And I wish there were more of that. I think you're right.
I think so too. I think so. But the problem is, though, Michael, if you are lost, you're going to find yourself, but sometimes someone might find you, and then you are literally, they'll find you before you find yourself, and then you just become their trail of thought. We're all programmed at the end of the day, but we need to make sure the programming is correct and it's in our best interest.
I know that when I went to university, I wanted to be a teacher. I always wanted to teach. I wanted to do something in the science world. But the other side of all of this discussion is that something happened along the way that caused me to need to, not need to, but shift exactly what I was doing instead of going toward teaching. And I had a secondary teaching credential, but I had been offered an opportunity to work to help make a new piece of technology available to blind people. And I was hired to coordinate a project for 18 months where literally we put product around the country for people to use. So I was the person who would literally live out of suitcases in hotels for 18 months, writing curriculum, writing procedures, teaching people to use the technology, and eventually writing a final report. And I suppose you could say that as a result of that, like writing training curriculum, I really did start to teach, although it was a little different than what I thought. And then I went to work for that same company. And after about 8 months, instead of doing the kind of work that I had been doing, was told that I had to be laid off because I wasn't a revenue producer unless I was willing to go into sales. And what I learned, so you'll appreciate this, what I learned, though, I took a Dale Carnegie sales course, what I learned and still believe absolutely firmly today, that the best real salespeople are teachers. You're teaching people about your product, and you can't force somebody to buy unless they really want to, and you might be able to break down their will, but that isn't the best way to sell. The best way to sell is to teach, advise, and counsel. And when you do that, it will reward you in so many ways. And I saw so many examples of that over time. So I ended up teaching anyway.
Wow. And you hit the nail on the head. When I went into leadership first, similar story, it forced me, I was always able to generate revenue. But when I had to teach people how to generate revenue, it made me a better revenue generator.
Yep.
Because you need to articulate it in a different way. You need to influence the people that you're surrounded by. It's a different sell, if you like. But yeah, Michael, I hate to tell it to you, you were in sales in the end. You were in sales. So there you go.
Well, the other side of it is that the more you teach people, and you leave it open for them to be able to ask questions and explore with you, the more you're forced to learn, because invariably they're going to ask you questions you hadn't thought of.
Exactly.
Which is so much fun. And I learned early on when I was getting my teaching credential that when people ask you questions that you don't know the answer to, don't try to fake them out. Be honest. Be honest. Answer, I don't know. And then go find the answer. I had that happen to me when I was teaching a freshman algebra class, and there was an 8th grader who was accelerated, and he was in the class, and he asked the question. I don't even remember what it was, but it was a simple question. I just couldn't think of the answer. And I thought for a second, and I said, Marty, I don't know, but I'm going to go find out, and we will get the answer all up on the board tomorrow, and you're going to write it on the blackboard. Well, when I came in and he came in, He said, Mr. Hinkson, I got the answer. I said, I do too. Let's compare notes. And we did. And he wrote it up on the board. And 10 years later, I met him at a fair. And now he wasn't an eighth grader anymore. He had this deep bass voice. And he said, hey, Mr. Hinkson, do you know me? And I said, no, I'm Marty, that guy with the question 10 years ago. It was just amazing. But
isn't that amazing?
It's such a lesson.
Wow. And it's amazing the things that make such a big difference. It's the small things that it's the small things, but it makes a big difference.
They make such a big difference. And after I did that and told him I didn't know, my master teacher, who was also the football coach for the high school, came up, and Mr. Redmond said, you know, you told him you didn't know, and that was the best thing you could do, because if you tried to blow smoke, they would have caught you. They would never have had respect for you. You're going to have their respect from now on. Yeah, and absolutely. You know, that was so true. And it's the only way to do it.
Absolutely. But I think apart from the fact that you went on the journey with him to find the answer, and you didn't, as you said, try and blow smoke, but you shown vulnerability. And by showing some sort of vulnerability, we can nearly make a connection to that. Even it was funny, I was in a meeting there recently with another friend, a business partner of mine, if you like, and we both had the meeting, and I came in, had the meeting, and in my opinion, everything was perfect. Like, the appearance was perfect, the way I spoke, nothing was out of turn, every answer was given perfectly, coherently, etc. And my friend, his body language was a little bit off. He was slightly slumped. He wasn't looking at the person. I was looking dead in the eyes. When I observed what he was doing, it didn't look perfect. Mm-hmm. But before the end of the meeting, the two guys that we were sitting across the room, the question came up, like, what's your thoughts? The guys directed to my friend, and they said, I'm feeling exactly, it's like he's inside my mind. They totally resonated with him. And I had to assess it at the end of it. I was there. I was perfect in that meeting. Why did they resonate with my friend who wasn't perfect, and they didn't resonate with me? And I assessed it was that. The guys we were talking to weren't perfect. And the fact that I was trying to be perfect, it nearly alienated them. And they connected on an emotional level with my friend because he wasn't trying to be perfect. Nothing about him was perfect, but they resonated better with them. So sometimes when we try to be that perfect individual, it can create suspicion to the counterpart, and showing vulnerability is more human.
And it shows you for what you really are, not trying to be something that you're not necessarily at all. When I speak, I love to speak in person when I can. I will speak virtually, but when I speak in person, I get to hear the audience. And I know there are a lot of people who say, well, you can't see the audience. I don't need to see the audience. I can hear the audience. And one of the things that I have learned to do when I speak is to put different phrases or different things in, sometimes a joke, sometimes just a comment, or sometimes a question that I want people to just somehow respond to. And I listen for the reactions, and that has taught me over the years, and now tells me how well I'm really connecting with the audience. And if I decide that I'm not really connecting, I will change something to connect, because I want to be with them and I want them to be with me. I believe that as a speaker, I never talk to an audience. I talk with an audience, and it has to be that way for the best speeches. And so I don't read speeches. I customize, and sometimes I've had to do it as I go. I've got great stories about that. But the bottom line is that it's all about connecting. And when you can connect, it makes a whole huge difference.
That's amazing. So you're putting out little feelers, if you like, just to get the energy from the audience. And you can almost gauge what type of audience you are going to be speaking to just by the props that you put out, if you like. Oh, absolutely can. Yes. That's now amazing. Having said that, they're all going to try to fool me from now on, but nevertheless, you know. I recently heard of a story, something about, I can't remember the term, but you may have even heard of it. It was about 100 years ago. There used to be a horse, and it was a German trainer, and he had a horse, and he used to go around to fairs, and the whole thing was that he claimed that the horse could understand language. So he used to bring the horse into the fair, and they'd be surrounded by people, and then he would get the horse to spell out certain names, certain words. So he'd ask the question to the audience, and the question could be, "What color is this apple?" And then the horse would go over and he'd spell out red apple, like going over to the thing. He was able to do multiplication tables. He was able to do division. It was world famous, this horse. So then a couple of scientists came over, and they were there trying to find, obviously, some holes in the story. And they wanted to see if it was, if the horse could actually do that. So they went to the guy, they got the guy out of the room, so that they thought that was it. They whispered to the horse, go to multiply 7 by 7 as an example, and all the stadium was there. The guy would whisper into his ear, and then the horse would go over and he'd do 49. But then by the end of it, they were there. What could it be? So what they did is they got rid of the audience, and then the horse was no longer able to spell, multiply, or divide. And it turned out that the horse, when the question was presented to the audience and the horse would be going over to the number or the letter, the audience anticipation, the horse would feel the anticipation. The horse would anticipate, he would anticipate, and it was by the feeling that the audience was given that the horse was able to hone in on that. So Michael, you are that horse. So you are better. That is what you're doing. You're getting the full feeling from the audience.
Yeah, I get a lot of information, which makes sense.
Amazing. That is amazing.
So what was your first job with Bank of America? What did you start doing?
Oh my word. So we went in. So now keep in mind.
Besides being a clothes model.
Yeah. Keep in mind, when I got my first job in Bank of America, I was leaving college and I was suffering severely from depression. Now, if anyone, whether it be yourself or anyone else that knows anything about depression, it doesn't just remove all of your confidence, but it literally shakes you to the core. It's a terrible affliction on anyone. And my first job was actually working in Bank of America in their credit card division. So when I had just finished my training, I walked into that sales floor, and there was about 300 absolute lunatics. I walked in there, the energy in that place. There was, over on the left-hand side, when I walked in, there was 2 girls running down the full length of the corridor, having an egg and spoon race for money. There was someone over the other side throwing darts at balloons that were filled with money. This place was just insanity. It was craziness. And there was so much confidence in the place. And that was my first job with those. And I remember being brought straight to my cubicle. And just so I wouldn't have to make eye contact with anyone and speak to anyone, I was straight on the phone, making cold call, and pushed at it, and literally banging out 100, maybe 150 calls a day. And that's no joke.
No, I hear you.
15 years ago is a lot different than it is now in terms of output, in terms of whatever on a dialer. But as the skills started developing, and as the conversations I started having with these individuals, every conversation, every sale I made, it was like it was rebuilding a stone wall of confidence that I had knocked down through the years before. And it was an amazing, just almost metamorphosis of someone that came in with the most unconfidence. On the shell, I probably looked okay, but internally I was broken. But through dealing with that adversity and through learning those new skills, it changed who I was. It changed who I was. And I still have those same skills today, but and learned a lot from that experience. But call center, finance, credit card, the hardest thing you could ever do in the situation I was in. And I loved every second of it.
I worked my first job. Well, it wasn't my first job, but in late 1980s into 1990, I went to work for a company, and they're the ones that eventually asked me to go to New York to open an office, because I was selling from the West Coast to the financial markets of Wall Street. And we were doing it all by phone. So I think my record was about 120 calls a day. Normally it wasn't that high because I spent time with customers explaining things about products. So for me, when I had 120 calls a day, I knew that in some senses, maybe I planted seeds, but wasn't as productive at getting sales as I was when I had fewer calls, because fewer calls meant I was actually interacting more with customers, which is the way I looked at it. Our bosses wanted as many calls a day as possible, and that wasn't as practical as it should have been, but we overachieved goals, so it was okay.
Yeah, and I think that is a trail of thought in sales. It's a numbers game, and to a certain extent that is true, but it's about the value you're having with the customers. That's where the true change can happen.
Yeah. A lot of people didn't have anywhere near the number of calls, even on a good day, if you will, from a sales standpoint, because people tended to be way too distracted, spent too much time talking and not on the phone. And I loved being on the phone. It was a lot of fun.
Yeah, exactly. I wonder, you saying it's a lot of fun, you can nearly convince yourself that it's a lot of fun. And that's the trick as well. You need to, it's a lot of people avoid getting on the phone because they're, I don't know, it's their mindset of, I don't want to get on the phone. So
I don't want to talk to people. I'm afraid to talk to people. They might ask me something to show me up, which is, of course, getting back then to our whole discussion from before. It's okay if you get a question you don't know. And that happened to me a number of times, which also helped me learn a lot technically. But when people ask questions, if I didn't know, I would just say, look, I am not sure. Let's finish this conversation, and with other things that we have to do, tell me when I can call you back. I'll have an answer. And I worked always to have an answer. That was so important. And I do that today.
I like it. Yeah.
It's important. So how long did you do credit card stuff?
Did it for 2 years.
Wow.
A year, give or take 2 years, which is, it can be a long time, but I found while I was there, obviously I went from severely depressed, a broken individual, to being one of the top performing executives right across Europe for Bank of America in terms of the output and the close rate, revenue I was generating. So I was riding high, but I always wanted that success, but I didn't even know what really was success. But what I found during that whole, I suppose, year and a half, 2 years that I was doing that, I was still displaying the same sort of habits that brought me depression years before. The only difference was now I had a lot more money to partake in certain things. So you've still got the same, how would you put them, internal behaviors that bring you back down.
Yeah.
And even though you on a conscious or an intellectual level, you may want that success, so to speak, but on an emotional level, you begin and continue to display behaviors that just brings you straight back down.
Yeah, you're not
so.
There yet.
Yeah, exactly. And that's another thing, I suppose, in universities, what they could teach you. They teach you skills, but they don't teach you correct habits. And if on a day-to-day and a lifestyle, in a lifetime, in a day-to-day, and even in an hour, your life is just made up of tiny little minuscule habits and thoughts. And people focus on the big things. I'm going to have this house, or I'm going to have this money, or I'm going to have this life. But they take their eye off the ball on the tiny little minuscule things. And that's what makes all the difference. And I did that for 2 years. But again, all my tiny little decisions were combinated to poor outcomes. Whereas, and I think that's something I learned. It took me a long time to implement certain changes that removed bad habits, because again, talent sometimes is a man or a woman's biggest curse, and you can learn that no matter how bad things are, I can bounce back from it, and that nearly is one of your worst enemies. Whereas if you focus on just the small things you can control and the small habits, it allows for long-lasting success.
So what did you do after credit cards?
property, did a bit of property. It was this was pre GFC, so property was all the rage, and it was all where the revenue was. That was fun as well. That's when I first moved to the fine city of Dublin, Ireland. So I spent a number of years up there, and we were selling property in Spain. So it was all golf course, beautiful properties. I don't think many of them survived the global financial crisis. So there's a lot of green open land over there. I don't think many survived, but it's funny. There's always, if you want to make money, just the money is raining everywhere. And if you want to make it, you just have to go and stand under where it's raining most.
Yeah.
And at that time it was property. But the rain eventually stops, so you need to know when to get out. So yeah, it was an interesting, great learning experience there as well.
Well, you have been doing work in the financial industry, and I'd love to hear more of the other things that you've done since, but you've been in this business for almost 20 years. So you've dealt with Gen Z, you've done with millennials and Gen X and even baby boomers. What are the different groups like? How's all that evolved, and has it evolved in a good way from boomers to Gen Zers?
Yeah, wow. In Australia now, when we first came to Australia, how we integrated so well was our commitment to and it wasn't even our commitment, how we integrated so well, much like most immigrants, you just get stuck in, you just try and do your best. Sometimes it's just to put food on your table. So you've got that mindset of pushing forward. That allows you immediately, just one of the laws of the universe, by pushing forward and doing your very best as much as you can, you're going to get certain results from it. And we were greeted with open arms by the Australians. What seems to happen with a lot of the younger generation that's coming through, they don't have that hunger to succeed. It's more of they're entering a safe place, and they're not prepared to step outside that safe place to succeed. That's why I do believe travel does implement certain behaviors that can be so valuable to people, as long as you're not supported by your parents on your trip. There needs to be an opportunity for you to go very, very hungry. And that's going to be a lot of learning from that. So with a lot of the Gen Zs, for the last 10 years, when I've been working in this industry in Australia, the feedback from the market is these people are a jellyfish generation. There's not as much, no one just wants to get stuck in. No one wants to do this. And I've heard that so often, but why doesn't someone do something about it then? Like, why do we accept those certain things by people, or why do we accept those certain behaviors from individuals? And a lot of times people will do what they see. And I think as leaders, we're leading Gen Z, if you like. We need to be living a life that inspires those individuals that they want to follow. So if you've got a lot of people that aren't, we'll say the jellyfish generation, Gen Zs aren't, they don't want to make it. Well, perhaps that we need to, as leaders, we need to be living lives that they want to emulate, that they want to follow. Because there is a lot of people that they just don't, no one wants to do nothing. People want to be inspired. Once they're inspired, they will push through. And I think what's lacking with Gen Z is inspiration. There is not enough people to inspire them to on a path that they want to follow or they need to follow. So with Gen Zs, I've worked a lot with them. It is challenging because, as I said, a lot of them don't want to step outside their comfort zone. And what I found to help them with that was for me to live, from a leader and from a mentor, to live the best possible life I can, with the best possible habits, with the best possible mindset. And of course, by leading from the front. Yeah. And if you can do all of those things, no, you're not going to get 100% of the Gen Zs, if you like. But what you are going to get, you're going to get the people that want to change. And you can't change people that don't want to change. But when you've got the opportunity to inspire certain individuals, you need to do it right. So
do Do you think that a lot of them feel more entitled, or they want to feel that they're entitled as opposed to have to earn?
Yeah, well, there is that, of course. Like, yes, there's a certain level of entitlement that is it really entitlement? Because again, a lot of times they'll want to okay, well, this is what it is. To change yourself. Okay, so as an example, from a diet standpoint, it's not hard to have the perfect physique, to eat perfect, to do things as close to perfect as you can. That's not hard. Conceptually, that's not hard. But to implement that and to actually stand by your diet, to stand by your exercise routine, something as simple as this, it's a lot easier to not do that. The simple things are easy to do, but the simple things are easy not to do. That's the problem. And it's a lot easier to focus on external matters as opposed to internal matters. And I think that's what it is. A lot of the Gen Zs, if you like, it's easier to focus on things that are outside their control and focus all their attention on that, or even use that as a leverage, than it is to focus on the simple things of the internal, because that's the easiest to do, and it's the easiest to not to do. And I think that's where the thing is. But I think that comes back to inspiration. When I've worked with individuals, they see the work ethic, they see the true desire to help these individuals, and that can inspire people. So I think as leaders, I think the Gen Zs, yes, they might be entitled, but what about the leaders? What are the leaders doing about that?
That's, of course, always the question. What about the millennials and the Gen Xs?
The millennials and the Gen Xs, yeah, but again, they're the leaders that came before. They're the leaders that came before. And if I hear a lot of them, like I speak with them, I hope none of them are going to listen to this after, but I speak to them every day from a consultancy standpoint. And a lot of those individuals will complain about the people that are in their organization. But what are they doing about it?
Exactly.
What are they doing about it? How are you making it different? And you cannot push people to change. You need to lead people to change. And I'll be speaking to these business owners, these millionaire business owners. They'll be out of shape. Their business will be running to a certain extent, but there'll be big holes in their business and in their own personal life. If that's the case, how are you meant to inspire these individuals?
Yeah.
So a lot of people, even from a business owner, they will look to the Gen Zs or the Gen Ys, or they look to other individuals and say they're not doing what they're supposed to be doing. But that's deflecting from themselves. Are they truly doing what they are supposed to do to inspire?
Yeah, a lot of it has to absolutely do with inspiration, because people are going to relate to people they can look up to or that they can admire. And if leaders aren't doing that, then that's a problem. And one of the things that I've said many times is that bosses are not necessarily leaders, and leaders are not necessarily bosses. One of the things that I did whenever I hired a salesperson, in our initial meetings after they joined, I would say, let me explain what our roles here are. You're here to sell. I'm not here to tell you how to sell, because I hired you assuming that you know how to sell. Yeah. What you and I need to figure out is what I can best do to help you and add value to what you do to make you as successful as possible. And that's going to be different for every single person who I hire, because they all have different talents. And the people who got that leveraged me in many different ways, and it worked out really well. The people who didn't just plodded along as they usually do, and they didn't last very long. But the people who got it really put it to use. And we talked about like what I thought I could add in the way of value to what they do in terms of being a sales guy, but also being technical and a physicist and being blind. I learned to listen very well most of the time. My wife didn't always agree, but well, anyway, but the bottom line is that the fact is I would be able to add value to them, and they took great advantage of it, which I loved, because they were more successful. We worked as a team. We created a team, and it worked.
That is it. We are very aligned with our concepts there. We are very, very, very aligned with our concepts. And yeah, I think, yeah, Too much of it, too many people are being pushed from the back as opposed to being led from the front. And you as a leader did the right thing there by finding, how can I make you better? That's all I'm here to do, is make you better. So that's beautiful.
And look, if we make mistakes along the way, admit it and fix it.
There you go.
But most of the time,
and it's easy.
It's easy.
And I think that's what a lot of times, that's an interesting one, actually. Even getting back to school, like in school, I even remember for myself, you get asked a question and sometimes you'd be afraid to try and answer the question because you could be wrong. So you nearly get this PTSD of being wrong. And perfection shouldn't, when you're afraid of being wrong, then you're afraid of making decisions. And if you're afraid of making decisions, you're going to welcome procrastination. Making the wrong decision is in theory, it can be the right decision, because once you make a wrong decision, it's easy to rectify your path and get on the right course. But you just need to make a decision. You need to make a choice.
Yeah.
So if you can harbor that environment where mistakes are good, as long as you rectify them very, very fast, decisions are good. If you can harbor that type of environment, that's an environment where people are willing to learn, and that's where I've had success, I suppose, in any of the roles that I've been in.
Yeah, and I think it's important that we always learn. The best teachers are also good learners.
Yes, some of the best,
which make a lot of sense. How do you measure your impact or the impact of what you do?
Look, even if you just look at it from a sales standpoint, it's always numbers. You'll always just chase KPIs or numbers. But it was funny, achieving certain numbers has never been a hard thing, and you'll achieve certain numbers, you'll achieve certain goals, but it gets to the stage where even those certain things, there's not as much not adrenaline, but not enough dopamine that comes from achieving the goals. And I think when I assessed that a while back, why did I not feel, okay, we're after achieving this amazing goal, why do I not feel happy? It's just like, you've achieved it, now move on. And it wasn't until I was mentored by, actually, it was a former prisoner, and he introduced me to so much philosophy and learnings. And it wasn't about achieving these bigger goals or measuring certain success. We took it back a step and we just focused on our internals. So when I look at measuring success, I don't look at the bigger picture. I look at the smaller little things. So to build confidence, that's where success is meant to give you confidence. But I like to do it the other way. I like to build confidence to gain success. So I'll start off by trying to measure success in myself. Now, what I mean by that is, I'll be up at 4 a.m. I'll drink 2 liters of water. After 2 liters of water, I'll do a small bit of stretching, and I'll read, and I'll journal a small bit. Then I'll go into a hard workout. Then I'll go in and I'll have a coffee after that. Then I'll go in and I'll try and I'll ensure that I've got no negative thoughts during that whole 2-hour process. So by the time that 6:30 comes, or 7, I'll have achieved 6 to 7 things that very, very few people will have achieved. I will consider that success. That success that I got within 2 hours, that most people won't even achieve that simple thing in a week. By achieving that success, I'll consider that success. So I suppose if I take it back, where I used to always go wrong, where a lot of people go wrong, they'll look at this big goal as a measure of success. And then when they don't achieve it, they feel inferior or they feel whatever. Whereas I'll take it back and I'll look at every moment of my day as an opportunity to be successful. And that pushes me forward like a Concorde plane throughout the entire day. And then the bigger things don't matter because I've achieved all the smaller things. And then it just happens so that the bigger things present themselves.
And you've cleared your mind.
Completely.
So what is it you do today? What work do you do now?
I do a number of different things. I'm involved in a number of different startups. One of the things that I've always, I suppose nowadays you'd call it ADHD, or you'd call it something, but I love looking at shiny things, and I'm always overstimulated by opportunities. So I work with a number of different startups in the AI space. I coach people, I mentor people, and I'm one of the founding directors of the Hummingbird Sales Academy, which is a sales academy specifically to instill confidence, values, and ambition in individuals. So it's sales, yes, and sales is something that we focus on, and skills and communication that we focus on. But really, our sales academy is focused on habits and instilling mindset and habits in individual. And that's where we've gotten success from our academy.
So is it a virtual academy, or is it in person, or how does that work?
Right now it's how would you call a blended learning, if you like. So what we find is, obviously, if you go to a sales training or any sort of course, immediately you come back from it, you're highly motivated. And this is the problem. Motivation can dip. So what we find is, even during our 2-day boot camp, there's huge growth. There's huge motivation. There's people nearly doing push-ups at the end of it. You know what I mean? Just you're ready for action, but that motivation can wane.
Yeah.
So we blend it in with weekly coaching calls and conversations to go through things. We have regular meetups, and of course, then there's the online training. And you need to, for our coaching to work, it's all about mindset. So there is a lot of fitness that's blended in. There's diet that's blended in. There's, how would you put it? Some people would look at it and they'd say, well, that doesn't sound too enjoyable. But the idea is you need to change your mindset and focus on things that aren't that enjoyable. Because once you focus on them and you master them, and you trick your mind into thinking this isn't that enjoyable, but then you trick your mind into thinking, I love this. This is the best thing ever. Exactly what, like you on the phone, Michael, you thoroughly enjoyed being on the phone. There's people that don't enjoy something as simple as that. But when you trick your mind and you consistently do it, and your mind tells you eventually that you love this, that's what our program is about. It's about looking at things that may not be enjoyable on paper, and it's doing them to a level that suddenly you begin to love the uncomfortable, if you like.
And of course, a lot of the times that we don't enjoy something, or we think it's not enjoyable, there's usually fear or something behind it that we have to break through and recognize maybe it's not really what we thought.
So, well, there's two voices. There's two voices in our head, the king and the queen. I could use other terms, but we'll just use the king and the queen for the moment. And the king, all the king wants to do is conquer. Yeah. All the king wants to do is conquer. He wants to go out there. He wants to eat only when he needs to eat. He wants to conquer. He wants to build. He wants to grow. He wants to mentor. And then there's the queen. And the queen wants to relax. The queen wants to lounge. The queen wants to enjoy the spoils of war, enjoy the spoils of the day. And every single morning, every single hour almost, you're encountered with the king and the queen. And you get to listen. Who do you choose to listen to? And that's going to define your day. So when I'm up at 4 a.m. and it's pitch dark out and it's raining and I'm doing pull-ups or I'm doing certain things and I know there's very few people up, I'm listening to the king. But as soon as that alarm goes off at 4 a.m. and I want to go back to sleep and lie beside my beautiful lady, that's the queen telling me to just sit back, relax. You've been working out. You've been doing it too hard. Relax. Have a little break. So you get to choose to listen to the two voices. So part of our academy is identifying those voices and working on strategies on how to only listen to the person that's congruent with where you want to end up.
At any given time.
At any given time.
And get the two of them to communicate with each other. The king and queen should be communicating, but what do you do?
But that's it. And I won't lie to you. It was. I went on a couple of years ago. I went to Cambodia and I did a retreat, a silent retreat, and meditations and all the rest of it. And it was one of the guys that I worked with. She had said, "Derek, you're too young You need to find your
Mm-hmm.
yang. You need to find your yang, man. You're too yin. So you're right. The king and the queen need to speak together. Maybe I don't listen enough, and that's also a detriment. So you're right. Maybe there needs to be the two of them need to speak together as well.
Yeah. Well, tell me, what is you invented the Stoic code? Tell me about that.
Yeah. Well, the Stoic code, as I said, one of my mentors and even one of my mindset coaches to this day. He was an individual that spent over 10 years in the penitentiary system in America. And he identified, he spoke so much on removing your future self and purely focusing on your this very moment in time, and only focusing on this very moment in time. And when I reflected on the success I've had and what's pushed me back, I realized there was never really any framework. I had all the skills in the world, but there wasn't really a framework that I followed. Everything was pushing forward, but there wasn't enough, how would you say, the foundation. I was building foundations. I was building beautiful, beautiful houses, beautiful lives, but on a foundation of sand. So the Stoic code, it's a framework. It's a framework for communication. It's a framework for influence, and that influence is also on yourself. But it's essentially it's a way to sell, it's a way to communicate, and it's a way to influence yourself. So the Stoic code, it's built on 5 principles: story, tenacity, objective, integrity, and communication. Sorry. So we've all got a story to tell, and as humans, we only resonate with story. We don't resonate with facts. We don't resonate with features. We don't resonate with benefits. We resonate with story. So when we're communicating with our clients or with ourselves, we need to have a relevant story that is going to be able to have that metaphor that people can connect with. So in our framework, we work a lot on our own internal stories and being able to identify our clients' external or internal stories that will help influence the communication channels, if you like. The tenacity in our framework is purely centered on, unfortunately, it's hard work. It's welcoming uncomfortable. Our objective in the story is understanding that, and this is where a lot of people fall down. They focus too much on the outcome. From a sales standpoint, they'll focus too much on closing the deal or reaching their commission, or they'll focus too much on getting the deal, if you like. And that certain behavior, that mindset is it sends you from a position of weakness, in my opinion. So the objective in our framework is you only focus on what you can achieve.
Yeah.
You can focus on your activity, your mindset, your attitude, and you remove yourself from the end outcome of the deal, if you like.
Yeah.
And it's funny, even putting, and then of course in integrity goes without saying, and the communication side of things is purely based on the communication standpoint, your body language, your tone, and every form of communication that's centered around influence.
Wow. And it's an incredible code, and it makes perfect sense all the way around. Well, yeah. I have to ask one thing. There's a rumor about a wedding coming up, huh?
I can't believe you got the invitation already. I only sent that out to you the other day. You got it in the post, did you?
I haven't gotten it yet, but I heard a rumor from a little hummingbird.
Oh yeah. Yeah, I am to be wed this coming December. I'm actually to be wed. So
congratulations.
Yeah, it's going to be an exciting one. So we're doing it in Malaysia. We're based in Australia here, but my partner, she's originally from Malaysia. So we'll do it on home soil. In the olden days, perhaps we do a home and away leg. But I think I'll settle just for the home leg in Malaysia for this one.
Good for you.
Yeah, so it should be an interesting an affair. It's my first wedding, and I can guarantee you, Michael, it'll be my last.
I've had one in my life, and it lasted 40 years. My wife passed away last November, which we're sad about, but I've got 40 years of marriage, and she's monitoring me from somewhere. So if I misbehave, I'm going to hear about it.
And keep in mind, she is monitoring you.
I'm no doubt about it.
There's no doubt about it. She's monitoring you. So yeah.
Well, if people want to reach out to you, learn more about the Hummingbird Sales Academy, or just maybe seek your counsel and advice, or just learn about you, how do they do that?
Absolutely. So you'll be able to get us at the Hummingbird Sales Academy .com. You get us at the website. You'll get me on socials. We'll leave them in the links in description. Whether this be from a business standpoint, an advice standpoint, or just to connect, reach out. We can share a lot of value with each other, and I think connections, making that human connection, is so important. So at any time, if you're listening to this, feel free to reach out and connect. Love to.
Cool. Well, I appreciate it. I appreciate you, and I really appreciate the time that you have spent. It's early in the day there, so it's what now, about 10 o'clock in the morning?
It's just 10 o'clock, and it's been a pleasure sharing a coffee with you, Michael. I'm sorry I couldn't put the kettle on for you here, but I've enjoyed my coffee with you. It's been a pleasure.
Well, I've enjoyed it very much. I hope that you've enjoyed it listening to us, to Derek and me talk. We'd love to hear your comments. Please feel free to reach out to me, Michael H.I. at accessibe, ACCESSIBE.com, or go to our podcast page, www.michaelhingson, MICHAELHINGSON.com/podcast. Love to hear your thoughts. Love to hear your opinions. I know that Derek would love it if you'd reach out to him. And wherever you're listening, please give us a 5-star rating. We value those very highly, and we hope that you'll be kind enough to give us a rating like that. And one last time, Derek, I really appreciate you being here, and this has been a lot of fun.
Absolutely, Michael. Absolute pleasure. Enjoy. Thank you again, and speak to you very, very soon.